From this corner of the St. Mary's River flow the fond memories of the Williams brothers, who lived for their favorite boys' playground, this river bottom they call the Horseshoe Bend. The water, not too swift. The fishing, very good. Rabbits and porcupines hiding in the brush, and silverberries to snack on. Then and now, it's a wide open space where no one else goes.
One of the standard recreations was to take whatever we could get and go off into hike down to the Horseshoe Bend on the St. Mary's River. That was our what do you call it, great place of refuge that we could really be in solitude and enjoy. And we hunted and fished, ate and played, and had forest fires, and burnt magpie nests, and shot hawks, and shot rabbits with bean flippers.
This family picture shows the children still a bit young for Horseshoe Bend, but not long after this age, the boys were regularly venturing to the river bottom. Shem recalls he may have been only 6 years old when he first went to the river, and they went alone. Alone except for each other's care.
Pleasures and satisfactions were taken from the contact with nature.
When the Williams brothers came here, familiar landmarks were named. Porky Place was a thicket of thorn and berry bushes, a haven for foraging porcupines. The pyramid, now a small mound, was then a large pyramid-shaped peak of river clay, about 60 feet high. And Pike Pond was the perfect place to snare those delightfully oversized fish when the river overflowed in the spring.
Now, in this backup, it's an ideal place for pike. And we would come to the edge of the riverbank and look down on the pike pond, and we'd see those big old pike lying there. And of course, after them we went.
At every chance, they'd hike the 3.5 miles across the prairie to the steep slopes leading to the river bottom.
So it was a pretty good hike for us, and we would start out in the mornings and take what we could, a can of beans, and to get down there, and nobody had a pocket knife. We had to take our .22 and shoot holes in a can of beans to get at them, to eat them, and whatever we could scrounge or rake up, bread or a stick of bread or anything like that.
We would go down in winter and make fires and cook. One time we went down and cooked up a pot of stew and couldn't eat it and left it. Came back a month later and finished it off.
In summer, Shem and B.Y. expertly stalked stream ducks and often were proud to bag a half-dozen greenheads or more. Nearby, in a place called 8 Mile Coulee, they dug a one-room cave out of the clay. It was the perfect secret hideaway for imagining youngsters. But the real summer favorite was swimming, in the creek and at the river.
Deep hole with a rock ledge that cut off sharply and dropped about 3 feet and gave us plenty of diving room, and we could run and jump off the bank and dive into that deep hole and swim around there, and you'd see the fish, you'd nearly reach them.
Winter at the river offered another menu of enjoyment. In this photo, Karl is skating with sister Loila, but often they skated with several friends, stroking 3 miles to the river and back home, sometimes having to take a short detour on the shore to avoid thin ice. The weekends at the river bottom became week-long trips to the mountaintops as the Williams boys grew up. Incredibly, at age 9 and 11, Shem and B.Y. made their first foot trip to the mountains, led by 15-year-old brother Karl. The destination? Belly River and Crosley Lake.
And Uncle Zeb Jacobs even took us in his car up to Seddon, from which we caught a ride on a logger's wagon. We arrived at the Belly River and made our beds and ate a little and spent the night there comfortably, got up in the morning and had our breakfast, and we were about ready to cross the river. Now, that presented problems. It was clear, but it was cold, and it wasn't too high. We could wade it maybe up to our waist, but it might not have been too wise. Anyway, at that juncture, up came two horsemen, Edgar Hinman and his friend Pete Grass from Raymond, and they ferried us across the river on their saddle horses. Set us down, and we hiked on, and came to the north end of Crossley Lake, and made our camp, and stayed there a night or two, and enjoyed it till our food was down, so depleted we had to go back. And the next morning we started out just about out of grub, and we walked from there down towards Cardston. We had roads now and trails to follow, and I remember the heat of the day and the sweat and the fatigue and the longing for water, and we knew we had to get to Lee's Creek to get water, and we hit the creek where the road from Beezer comes close to the creek above Russ Curl's place now, which was then the Bateman place. We went down the creek, built a fire, cooked rice and raisins. And I don't know whether we must have had condensed milk to go with it. And we filled up on that, and we tried to eat everything up, and I tried too hard. It made me sick eventually before I got to town, and I was vomiting. Anyway, we got to Crest Spring, which was up the creek, and drank again there, and then we arrived home. Tired, sweaty. I'm going to guess it was 4 days. 4 or 5 days. We had no sleeping bags. We had no pack bags. We just made shift. I've forgotten what the others had, but I had 2 gunny sacks and tied them together at the top and balanced them over my shoulder. Weight in front and weight behind. And that was my pack bag. But we'd had a grand trip. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
This first great adventure truly made mountain mavericks of these boys. From then on, they anticipated heading for Horseshoe Bend or some other rocky ridge. As young men, of course, they preferred to reach for the higher peaks. Wherever they were fishing, always fishing. Each pool, lake, or bend in the stream would fulfill their ambition, and the exciting results would give cause to do it again. Their gear was simple and unscientific. The most necessary item was a sturdy pair of boots. Personal packs were makeshift, although horses sometimes carried the load, but mostly the boys went on foot, preferring not to bother with the horses. When they were much older, there was hardly a mountain trip without the trusty mule Drapo. He carried all the camping equipment, sleeping bags, and food. Over that was a tarp, all tied down with a diamond hitch. Literally draped from head to toe, he was called Drapo. Part of Drapo's pack was the full boat, a collapsible kayak of sorts. At water's edge, the boat was assembled by piecing together its hardwood ribs and stretching over them the rubber hull and canvas top. It made the perfect watercraft. BY purchased it from a mail-order catalog which touted a sturdy, fully collapsible boat weighing only 100 pounds. Without the boat, fishing would have been much less productive and adventurous. It put the boys on the lake, while other fishermen could only stand on the bank. Many a long fish was pulled in by a fisherman in the full boat. Oldest brother Sterling Ora, called S.O. by his family, and later called Doc, may not have retreated to Horseshoe Bend, but he certainly had the mountain-loving spirit. This early family photo shows the 10-year age difference with S.O. standing next to Mother Atina, Sister Loila on the far left, and the 3 younger boys, B.Y., Shem, and Karl, seated on the porch. Really, by the time the younger boys were of river-going and mountain-climbing age, Brother Ora was a young man courting many girlfriends and preparing for a mission which would take him to far-off Great Britain. And after a mission, he would go to dental school in Chicago. In his youth, S.O. is remembered by his brothers to be involved socially and athletically. He played on his high school basketball team and loved to play tennis. so it's easy to see how S.O. might have put his passion behind a private tennis court, the only one in town, built just behind the Williams home.
As soon as S.O. got a little older, we had to have a tennis court. And, he built a tennis court in behind our house, level off the ground, and we did almost all of it by hand. I think we did all of it by hand, as a matter of fact, but we dug back in the bank to level it off, and we got to the point where it was clay, not sand, it was a good clay, and then we made a roller out of cement, out of a cement barrel, barrels filled it full of cement, and we rolled our court and had our own tennis court, which for a long time probably was the only one in town. And so we loved to play tennis. And the tapes were made of tape. And you took the tapes and you took a wire staple and you measured off and you stapled them down to the clay. And then every time it rained or when we could, we watered it and then we rolled it. The dandelions were always a big problem, keeping the dandelions out of it. And the nets were very, very poor in those days. They were threadbare, and they'd only last a year or two, and to us they were very expensive.
S.O. spearheaded the Williamses' effort to raise and break horses for a time. It was mostly a hobby, but also to earn money. Babe was one of the family riding horses, and she mothered many a foal for the horse-raising adventures. Shem is tending to the newborn in this photo, but all the boys were involved with the horsework. Doc is most remembered for his serene, secluded homestead, with its lovely log cabin home near the Ray Flat area of Pole Haven. Out the back door, his own family, his brothers and their friends, skied and enjoyed the freedom of the hills. Of course, skiing technique was unknown then. The rule was just hike up and let it fly. Skiing is a pleasure, but it required a long trip to the hills without a place to bunk out. So the Williamses and their friends got after the project of building a rough chalet of slabs named the Slab Citadel. However, the Citadel didn't meet Waterton Park building codes. After all, they were on park land. But the park said a cabin would be allowed. A building site was chosen near the old Slab Citadel. Friends and family brought their shovels, axes, and gloves for the groundbreaking. The logs were selected and felled right there with axes. No chainsaws in those days. Each was skinned and then laid out. Layer by layer, the walls grew.
But putting these big logs up there to build that cabin would have been no small undertaking, except that I had my famous old pack mule drapo. Took him and hooked him onto a big log. We didn't know what was going to happen, but we got him hooked up and told him to get going. Well, he hit that old collar and found he had a load on. So he just backed up, and I thought, oh, we got a balky mule. But he backed up a couple of steps and then took a running start at that collar, and he hit that old collar so hard it jerked him right up in the air. But he come down with his feet pawing, throwing turf and his belly to the ground, and he took that whole log. He never slowed up. He took it right into the sight and never quit. And it was a beautiful piece of work. He really did the job. And every log that went in that cabin was pulled in by the old mule.
The cabin served well as a stopover for the skiers and still stands as a first-class rendezvous point for people's adventures. As youths, S.O., Karl, B.Y., and Shem were known for their Welsh musical talent and sang together many of the old-time favorites.
Come, come, musters, come, come ere the die on the fair. Oh, come, 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 come forth like a fairy, so light and so airy, and ramble o'er my upper lip so gay.
Karl remembers a number of mountain trips when he was young that are outstanding in his mind, along with his music.
My father got a fellow up at Boundary Creek to take his wagon and team and take us into Crossley Lake in the Belly River and leave us there and come back in a week and pick us up, which he did. And we had a grand time fishing in the Belly River. I remember Father took us on a hike up the mountain. We went up a mountain. It wasn't the closest mountain you see to the Belly River from here, but it was behind that. We went to the top of that mountain and explored around, and we came back about the last day before our return, and the bears had raided our camp, and they had just got in there, and it was odd to see how they had bitten into tin cans and left holes. We had a can with cream in, and they bit a hole in that big can and carried off bacon, and we caught them in the act, and we chased them out of the camp. I remember, I guess Doc and I chased one bear about 10 or 12 feet behind him, and he went over a sudden drop about 2 or 3 feet, and then he was going to whirl around and look at us. Well, he whirled around and we nearly jumped onto him. And from that time, they patrolled around the camp. You could see them off walking around waiting for us to leave so they could raid the camp again. So from that time on, someone always had to stay in camp until the man came for us with his team.
Karl served in the Swiss-German mission. While there, his music excelled, as he was able to take singing lessons from a Swiss singing master.
He gave me lessons starting right from the ground up. He taught me the mouth positions for each vowel, and then taught me to bring my voice forward and so on, and gave me good instruction, taught me German songs, so on, and I've always valued that. And I'm glad that I took time to do that.
In fancy I stood on the shore one day of the beautiful murmuring sea, and I saw the great crowds as they thronged the way of the stranger of Galilee. I saw how the man who was blind from birth in a moment was made to see, and the lame were made whole by the matchless skill of the stranger of Galilee. And I felt I could love him forever, so tender and gracious was he. I claimed him that day as my Savior, the stranger of Galilee.
B.Y. was the businessman of the family. He would become a young, successful executive for the Cardston Loan Company and other enterprises. Some of his memories are of satisfaction in a job well done.
I might revert to school experiences, starting in the big old frame 2-story schoolhouse in grade 1, taught by a sour old maid in my days. The only thing I remember about her was that sitting in a seat there, and her instructions to write G's, as I understood it, on our slate. And I proceeded to write lines of G's on my slate, and the old bag walked down past it and rapped me over the knuckle to the big long pointer. And it hurt for a week. And that's the only educational impression I received in my beginning year of school. The instruction had been to write 1G, and I had written more than 1G. I should go back to earlier days of working experiences, I guess, in those days. Out of school, or before I was out of school, the only jobs were on farms. We used to go out stooking in the fall. And the binder was used in those days. It's a far cry from the present method of harvest. The binder would pick up the wheat. It'd be carried up and with a twine string bound around it and kicked out onto a carrier, and then about 4 bundles dumped at a place. Then we'd go along and put these 2 or 3 of these dumps into a stook. It was hard work. I remember one of our early jobs, we went out to old Skinner Nielsen, he was called, out in the Jefferson country. We were just kids. Well, Karl and I were out there, but I think I was about 15, something like that. He asked us how we wanted to work. Whether we work by the hour or work by the acre. And we didn't know. I said, well, we work by the hour. Well, we went and we stooped, and we didn't lie down behind the stook and sleep, which had been his experience with a lot of kids that had come out from town. So we put up a lot of stooks. When we got through, we went to collect our pay, and old Skinner Nielsen, as he was called, his skinning of us consisted of simply insisting on paying us by the acre, because we'd earned a lot more by the acre than we had by the hour, because we had worked hard.
Youngest brother Shem had to get his ringlets cut before he could go to Horseshoe Bend with his brothers. This is a portrait of Shem and B.Y., with Shem about 3 years old and seated on the right. After that, it may be said that Shem never got over the wildlife and adventure of Horseshoe Bend. From hunting cottontail to hunting bear, Shem loved to take aim.
We came along towards the ridge. We could hear these bears talking. Just as plain as anything. You could hear them talking with each other. And we knew there's more than one. We stuck our head up over the hill, and here they were about 50 feet away from us. 3 of them. And they were cavorting around, and I put my gun on them and said, shoot for hell's sakes. And I shot the first one, and he started coming towards us. 3 grizzly bears, and he started coming towards us, and my friend didn't shoot. He held back. He was scared or not, but I started loading him, lead in him. He was coming towards us, and he fell. He grabbed a quaking asp about that big around. He grabbed it in his teeth as he fell, and he clinched on it like that. And he fell over, and he was only a little ways away from us when he fell. And then we looked for the other 2. We'd got that one safely dispatched. We looked for the other 2, and they had gone. But I stepped up on the bank, and I looked way up the clearing. Oh, it must have been a good 250 yards anyway, 300 yards away, and the bear had gone up the clearing, lickety-cut, as hard as it could go. And he just got to the open of the clearing, and he stopped. And he stopped. I just snapped a quick shot at him. I just leveled off quick and snapped a shot at him. And I knocked him for a loop. It was a beautiful shot because it was so fast and so fun. But we had missed the 3rd one. But we knew he was in the vicinity. So we made a big fuss about these, of course. We took pictures and had people up all night. And the park people knew about it, and they didn't make a fuss in those days. And we were shooting out the park, and they didn't make it. We told them about it, and took pictures and so on. But next day or so, I said, we better go up there again. We better see what the other one's doing. So we went to our original spot where we had bait before, but we didn't have any bait there at that time. We went to the original spot, and I came out in the clearing, and B.Y. was with me. And I said, now it's your shooting. I've shot. It's your shot this time. And the bear came through the trees, And there was snow, it was spring snow, but there wasn't any fresh snow. It was kind of melting, and he was walking with his back arched and his feet down in a way you'd never see a bear. He was quite a dark grizzly bear with a very dark brown on his bottom and just silver on top. And he was walking that way as he came through the trees. I never forget it because I've never seen, it would look like, see what animal walks that way. A wolverine. You'll see pictures of a wolverine when their back is arched and they're walking kind of on their toes. That's the way he was walking. And as he came in the clearing, I said, "B.Y., let him have it." And B.Y. shot, but he hit him too far back. And the bear turned around and made one leap. I don't know how many feet he leaped, but he leaped so far that when he landed, he couldn't handle the landing, and he rolled over, and then he leaped again. And on the third leap, I let him have it, and I hit him right above the eye, and so we got the third one. Of course, we had to take pictures because there's a nice little oozing of brains out there where had to take pictures of that, and skinned him out. Those were fun grizzly time.
Nature was the setting for many fun family times. Skating together was a delightful memory. Here, all 7 of the Williamses pose on skates: Sterling, Shem, Atina, B.Y., Doc, Loila, and Karl. Mother Atina enjoyed her son's love for nature and joined in some outings. Of course, whatever they brought home made her proud, like this handsome string of grouse. Atina and Sterling's home is sometimes remembered as the Pink House. It still exists today, although with a remodeled shape and color. But originally it looked like this, a plain home, but managed by Mother Atina with plenty of spirit.
My mother was a pragmatist and a joker, and she loved a good joke and a good laugh. She contributed to these things as a person who confused her words. What do you call that? Can't think of the word. She'd malapropisms. I remember a couple of her choice ones. As we were coming back from Lethbridge one day, in the days when combines were just taking over from the binder, and she remarked, "Oh, look at that concubine off in the field working there." And another time, Mr. Hornberger was visiting, and she was being introduced to him, and he introduced Mr. Hornberger, and she said, "How do you do, Mr. Whoremonger?" Those were malapropisms that we got a great kick out of, and Mother got as big a kick as anybody. She'd laugh right with us. Didn't bother her at all.
And my mother was reputed to be one of the thriftiest buyers in town. When I was in Palm Springs, they told the story of how Mother went over and bought some groceries, some apples, box of apples, and a few things, some toilet paper, and they were going to deliver it from the grocery store, and before they got to delivering it, they had a phone call, and Mother phoned back and said, "Brother Matkins," she said, "are those apples wrapped?" And he said, "Yes, they're wrapped." She said, "Well, don't send them with the toilet paper now."
Father Sterling made a life's work as a temple recorder. He was so devoted that over the 30 years of work, he always declined to accept a raise in pay. Another part of Sterling's reward may have been in his gospel service as a counselor in the Alberta Stake Presidency. This extensive work had him traveling all over the province. Father Sterling was himself a fine hunter and fisherman, and a father of adventurous mountain mavericks could not be without expeditions with his sons. There were the early mountain trips Karl remembers, but also fishing expeditions with Shem and B.Y. This time, on a high-up hike, Sterling, Karl, and Shem peek over a snowdrift.
Father, as indicated, was not much of a businessman, and he never made much money, although he was highly educated. He was the first, as I remember it, with qualifications to teach school by virtue of a university degree. He went to the University of Manitoba after he arrived there and graduated with the silver medal indicating the highest scholastic honors of the university.
The School of the Mountains offers high honors to Sterling's sons. The wide-open spaces, the freedom to roam, and a love for the land taught them many of life's lessons, of tenacity, industry, and simple simplicity. On every mountain trip, the Williams brothers leaned on each other and were fearless in their adventure. And that is a life lesson for all of us, a lesson first learned at Horseshoe Bend.